vulnerability. I believe that that's such a strength rather than a weakness. And I don't know if it's men and women, but I'm willing to bet you it's more of a trait in men that they believe being vulnerable is a weakness. When I look at it as a strength, it's like you got to understand you don't know everything. You need help. You can't do this journey by yourself. And so I believe that in order to unlock that sort of part of you, that you have to be willing to be vulnerable and understand I need help in this process as well.
Well, welcome everyone back to another Masters of the Game interview. And today I get to introduce you to Michael Saunders. Now, here's what's crazy. It's such a small world, right? And, funny how things work. I met Michael actually on a volleyball court. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago. And we talked briefly at that time. Our girls played volleyball together on the same team. I briefly met him, I remember. And then our girls ended up on the same team this year. And we reconnected and we got talking. And I think we were just, I think the whole day it was like, what volleyball? And we were just talking baseball and life and the mental side and all this sort of stuff. So today I asked Michael right away, I'm like, you got to be on the interview series. Will you please be on the interview series? And he graciously accepted. And you guys get to meet Michael, and we get to tell stories and go down memory lane and talk about baseball, talk about what it takes to get to the highest level. So, Michael, I'm going to go through your background here in a minute, but first of all, welcome, man. So excited to have you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you. I love how you brought up that story. I remember I reintroduced myself to you this time around, and you're like, well, actually, we met briefly there a couple of years back, and then our daughters split ways, and I think I was there for like a game or two. So I couldn't remember. I was just like, okay, where are the dads at? Like this kind of thing, trying to introduce myself. But man, super happy we reconnected. Some of my most joyous moments are watching my kids play sports, and not only that, but to have some cool parents along the sidelines of it also helps. So
yeah, it's so fun. And when you look at your background, so for people who don't know more about you, and I tell you with all of our guests, like everyone watching, listening right now, like go research these people, right? And just dive into their background and understand their journey and path. But you're a Canadian-born guy. I think all us Americans are like, you're Canadian, eh? Like, I don't know why we always do that or why I always do that.
No do to boot it, right?
But you had, the great opportunity, obviously with your baseball background, to play in the major leagues with the Mariners, Blue Jays, the Phillies. You had the opportunity to play in the Little League World Series with Team Canada, to represent Team Canada at the Olympics in 2008 in Beijing, China, to play in the World Baseball Classic. You've had these just amazing experiences. And even to the point of you have two very unique nicknames. One we talked briefly before, but the Condor, which we'll get into a little bit, but also Captain Canada. I mean, come on, man. Come on.
Who knew? Everyone knows about, Iron Man, Captain America, Superman. Who knew that Captain Canada was your neighbor from the north, right?
Oh, so
he's
good.
He's going to be on he might be on the next Avengers. We'll see.
That's so good. But I'm so pumped to dive into kind of your journey to the majors and what you're doing now. Now you're a coach with the Seattle Mariners, and just fascinating journey. We've had fascinating discussions again on the volleyball court, but I want to start off with this question, take you down memory lane a little bit. But what's one of the greatest memories you have from your playing days? That's a loaded question, big question to start.
Yeah. Okay. So luckily, I have answered this one in the past. There's a couple that come to mind. I think, but my greatest memory was hitting my first major league home run. But it wasn't necessarily being the first. It was in 2010 on Mother's Day with my mom in the stands. And it was a 2-0 pitch against Irvin Santana, fastball, and got the head out, and I hit it, and it was a line drive, and it just squeaked over the fence, right? But the beauty of it was that there's a little gap at Safeco, now T-Mobile, but there's a little gap between the first row in the outfield of fans and then the fence. So it actually landed in there. Our bullpen catcher was able to go get it. And he gave it to me after the game, which I ended up giving to my mom. So that was my personal, my fondest memory. And
yes.
Other than that, anytime I got a chance to represent my country was really, really unique and special for me.
That's amazing. Yeah, what a nice gift for your mom to be able to see it and get the ball. And it's got to be something special to, again, represent Canada and play against the best of the best along your path. Walk me through your journey to the majors, right? Because again, you spent some time in the minor leagues, all that stuff, but walk me through kind of that journey and our listeners, like what was that journey like for you until you were finally called up?
Yeah. So, I was sort of, when I was younger, I played everything growing up. And when I say everything, I mean everything. And then I ended up narrowing it down to hockey as a winter sport and baseball as a summer sport. And for multiple reasons, I ended up gravitating towards baseball. And one of the things I alluded to earlier was I got an opportunity to represent Canada with the junior national team.
Yes.
And so I played over in Asia, South America, Curacao. And I think playing against these other countries and representing my own country of Canada, I think that is what really made me truly fall in love with the game. Recognizing it's a worldwide game, and I think that was sort of the thing that pushed me over the edge in order to choose baseball and really pursue this. And then so I went down, got drafted in 2004 out of high school by Seattle. And at that point, which is no longer around, but there used to be a draft and follow for anybody. Matt, you're in my age.
Yes.
Draft and follow, right? Which means for anybody who doesn't understand what that means is that you're able to draft players usually out of high school. All right. And if you can't come to agreement, or you just say, hey, listen, we don't want to sign you. However, we drafted you because we want your rights. We want you to go to school and let's renegotiate before the next year's draft to see if you've mentally, physically matured or whatever the case may be. And anyways, that was my route, right? So I went down to Tallahassee Community College, which is down there in Florida, feeder into Florida State. Really good conference, Panhandle Conference for junior college. And I ended up signing with Seattle a week before the 2005 draft. So that was my route as a draft and follow to professional baseball. And from there, I hit all the stops. My first stop was in Everett, which was short season A ball at the time. Now I believe it's high A. But anyways, I hit Everett, then Wisconsin, High Desert, Double A, Triple A, and then I got my first call. So that was sort of my journey through the minor leagues. And for me, it took me about 3.5 years to go from short season to the major leagues. And I'll never forget it. I got called up July 25th. I was playing really well in AAA, and we had a night game in Tacoma. And luckily, in Seattle, Tacoma's only 30 minutes down the road.
Yes.
From Seattle, so it's a nice thing. Anyways, we played a night game. I go back to my apartment with my teammates, and I'm getting a call from our manager at about 11 o'clock at night, right? And I'm like, God, I've never gotten a call from our manager before, this kind of thing. And a funny thing, my buddies from Victoria, so I grew up just north of Seattle.
Yes.
Okay, so my buddies were planning on coming down and watching me play, AAA ball. And obviously, we're 22 years old, young and dumb. And, all my buddies are coming to town. So we're thinking, hey, we're going to go out. We're going to have and have some fun, right? And so I'm getting blown up by my manager, and my teammates are looking at me and they're like, hey, dude, you're either going to the big leagues or you're getting traded. It's one of the two. You got to take this call, obviously. So I call him back, and he's like, hey, I need you to come back to the yard. We're turning on the lights. And to this point, I've only played center field. He's like, we need you to start playing some left field. So we need you to come back. Okay, that's kind of weird. The guy must be messing with me, this kind of thing. So anyways, I come back, and, our hitting coach, our bench coach, and our managers in the office. Long story short, hey, you're going to the big leagues. You got a day game tomorrow in Seattle. Thinking, this kind of thing. It's about midnight at this point. Anyways,
yeah. So
my buddies are a little bit delayed, right? And so I'm all jittery. I'm packing my stuff, everything like that. I'm back at the place. My roommates are celebrating with me, so they go out. They're like, "Hey, we'll meet you out," this kind of thing. And anyways, long story short, my buddies finally show up at 1 a.m. Right? And they think we're gonna go out and have a good time and this kind of thing. I'm like, hey man, I can't be drinking tonight. I can't be going out. And they're like, hey, what's wrong? And so in the background, there's always a replay of the Mariners game, right? So the live is done, but there's always a replay afterwards. And my one buddy, who's kind of looking at me like, that's not like Mike, this kind of thing. He's looking at the TV, he's looking at me, he goes, wait a second. He goes, you tell me right now. I go, I'm getting called up to the big leagues. So they came to watch me play AAA ball, but little did they know my first major league game they were going to be a part of with me and everything. And
Amazing.
anyways, that whole night I didn't sleep. I was in my bed, eyes wide awake. I show up to the yard, I couldn't wait to get there, and heart racing like, crazy. So anyways, that's kind of my college.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I want to dive into this because I think sometimes certain players have a meteoric rise to majors, right? Yours was over that 3.5 year period, like relatively short, right, in the grand scheme of things. But what was your mentality like going through those 3.5 years? Because a lot of times when you're looking to make that jump, right, and that could be, I don't know, I'm a JV player in high school wanting to make varsity, right, and we gotta put in the work, or going to college, and we're working our way through the minors up to majors. But what was your kind of mentality like to stay focused over probably, I don't know if it felt like a long time, 3.5 years, like waiting, but what was that mentality like where you were able to just like lock in and stay focused that whole time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, honestly, up until my junior year of high school, I didn't even know how guys played on TV. I loved watching baseball. I was like, how do they even get there? This kind of thing. I didn't know that there was a draft up until, scouts were giving me their cards or starting to talk to me. And then I started realizing, oh, this is how you get involved, and that's just how oblivious I was to the process. And I think, honestly, when I was younger, and I finally signed and got into professional baseball, I was in the mindset of like, I'm just happy to be here. Like I've not that I've made it, but like, wow, like look at all these other professional players. I'm just happy to be here. And I think that was sort of a blessing in disguise of I just concentrated on the daily and really concentrated on where my feet were that day.
Yes.
I was never thinking about, hey, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to be. It's like, no, I was really focused on the day-to-day process of everything, and just going out there and honestly having fun. And I think I played with freedom, even if I didn't do well. Tomorrow was a new day for me, and it was just the freedom to fail.
Yes.
And I think that's what helped me produce. And I never really like shined and truly stood out in the minor leagues up until maybe I was in double A, triple A. And part of the reason were my numbers weren't necessarily like off the charts, but I was really young. So
Yes.
you put my age with my numbers, all of a sudden it's like, oh, created a prospect here kind of thing.
Yes.
But I think to answer your question, I was super focused on the daily, and where my feet were, and I was concentrating on the process of the day-to-day grind of the game and not worrying about trying to get somewhere where, I wasn't. Control what you can control kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. So not so focused on like, I got to build this amazing plan to get to the majors, and these are the 5 steps. And it's just, I hear about kind of keeping your feet there, but also you seem to have like a joy for the game, right? Tell me if that's true or not, but like you love the game. Is that fair?
That's fair to say. Yeah, 100%. The game was never a job for me. I enjoyed scraping my elbows, diving back into first, or getting those raspberries, on my knee. I enjoyed it. It's all part of it, and I think it was just the mindset of like, I'm happy to be here. I remember where I grew up, and, I played baseball 3 months out of the year, in the Pacific Northwest of Canada. And it's like, hey, what season is it? Oh, that's the sport I'm playing.
Yes.
Nowadays you see, especially when the weather cooperates, Florida, Texas, California, like these kids are playing year round, and they start at, 8, 9 years old if they're only playing baseball.
Yep.
So I think it was a blessing for me too, growing up, just playing multiple sports. And then once I finally got there, like I said, it's like, holy, I'm here. Like it was a blessing for me at the time. And
yes,
one day at a time because of that.
Did you ever, like even during the major league career, get to a point where the love was kind of gone, or were you able to keep that the whole time?
No, not even close. Not even close. Yeah. So it was a really impactful part of my career. Actually, this is what led me to get interested and involved in mental health.
Yes.
And mental training as well, right? So like we alluded to, 3.5 years in the minor leagues. I'd been touted a prospect from a young age. And it was to the point where they said, like, okay, this guy's going to be the left fielder of the future for the Seattle Mariners.
Yes.
So I get my first call up. I'm 22 years old, and, I get about 120 at bats, and I struggled. I had hardly any extra base hits. A lot of soft singles, this kind of thing. So I go into the off season, and then I get sent down out of big league camp. So now it's 2010, and I start the year in AAA. So a couple of years, I'm up and down a little bit. And I get a call back up to the major leagues in May, and I finish the year. Right. And this time around, I'd shown a little bit more pop. I think I had double-digit home runs, but average wasn't good. So it was sort of an all or nothing approach, a lot of strikeouts, this kind of thing. But if I could figure out how to just kind of put this all together, and then, so to answer your question, now we lead into 2011, and our starting center fielder gets injured. Okay. And so now I'm the starting center fielder. First time in my career, I break camp with the big league team.
Yes.
So about a week before we break camp, my aunt, who's my mom's twin sister, she told me that basically my mom only had a few months to live. So she had been battling cancer for 13 years. And it's to the point now where it's so aggressive that it's only a matter of time. So there's no treatment that can help her. And I don't mean to be a damper on this interview, but so now I break camp and I show up every day to the yard physically, but not mentally. Yes. I'm not there anymore. I'm there to do a job, get it over with. But then I go to the deepest and darkest place in the universe in my hotel room, lonely by myself, talk to my mom and just, yes. You can imagine. Anyways, so now we're in June and I'm struggling so bad that they send me back to AAA. And I don't know anyone on the planet who would have been just relieved and happy to be sent down, and the pressure of performing every night in front of thousands of people on television. And, it was a job for me at that point. I had completely lost the love of the game. My mind was off in different places.
Yes.
And so I actually went home to Victoria to be with my mom after I'd been sent down in the middle of the season. Luckily, the Mariners were super supportive of it.
Yes.
Told me to take all the time I needed. Anyways, so I went home for about 3 weeks, and finally I felt ready to go back to play. And I'll never forget, it was a day game in AAA in Tacoma. It was in the 6th or 7th inning. I'm running in, and the manager meets me top step after 3 outs. He meets me top step. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm either going to the big leagues or, something's happened, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, we got a call from your dad. You need to go home. Your mom, took a turn for the worst, and this might be your only chance to say goodbye kind of thing. So anyways, went home, made it in time. My wife made it in time, and we were able to say goodbye. And I returned to play again about 2 weeks later, mainly because I wanted to make sure my dad was okay.
Yes.
So I went back, and then I got the courtesy September call up when they expanded all the rosters. Again, I think I started one game in 25. I'd pinch run, this kind of thing, going for defense. But in that game, I can't even remember. I'm sure it was an over. And then leading into the off season, I finally got an opportunity to grieve and really take in the entire process. And when I went home for those 3 weeks before my mom had passed, after I got sent down, my mom was so weak at that point that we had a hospice bed in our main floor. So she wasn't at hospice. She could at least still be home.
Yes.
And I remember I was upstairs, and she hadn't been able to climb the stairs in months. And I was showering, and all of a sudden I just broke down. I started sobbing, and it was a deep cry to the point where I feel like the neighbors could have heard me. And finally I collected myself. I never wanted my mom to see me, in that state. I collected myself, dried myself off, and I opened the door, and my mom's standing upstairs. And she's like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I got broke down again. How dare he do this to you? This kind of thing, talking about God. And she told me that she's like, I never told you or your sister this growing up. And I was about 12 years old when my mom first got diagnosed. And at that point, I was like, okay, I know cancer's not good, but I didn't really know how bad it was as a 12-year-old, you know?
Right.
She's like, I never told you or your sister this, but when I was first diagnosed when you were 12, I was given 3 months to live with how aggressive the cancer was. And she said, I prayed every day to see 50 years old and to see you and your sister walk down the aisle. And so after given 3 months to live, 13 years later, she ended up passing away a couple weeks before her 50th birthday. And she was able to see my sister and I both walk down the aisle and get married. And so when she told me that story and I finally grieved, it really took all the pressure in the world off of me to perform anymore. And I finally gave myself permission to fail again. And I was in the mindset of like, listen, if my mom could have done this, you know, what's so bad about an 0 for 4?
Yep.
You know, and once I finally had that perspective on the game again, the game became fun. I went out there and I had joy again. I didn't care. Like I cared, but excuse my French, I didn't give an F anymore about if I struck out with the bases loaded or whatever the case may be. So it really relieved all the pressure and the weight on my shoulders to perform every day. And I was able to play with freedom again. So there was that huge mental hurdle that I had to climb. And that's actually what led me into getting interested in the mental aspect of the game. So I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, but that was my story of how to, you know, to give myself permission to fail again.
Well, that's an amazing story. And I mean, resilience from your mother, right? I mean, can't imagine going through that, first of all, but just her praying every day of like, this is what I want. And she like wills herself to make it happen to you guys walk down the aisle is incredible. I mean, I'm getting chills over here thinking through that.
As you know, right?
Yes. So, I think you bring up that word I talk about all the time is like perspective, right? Of how do you have the right perspective on things? And you as an athlete, I'm sure you get asked this question a ton of like, how do you deal with the pressure, right? You just talked about that. Like, how do I deal with the pressure or playing at the highest level or whatever level you're playing at? It doesn't matter. But there's that perceived pressure that's there, right? And to your point, when you let go and give yourself permission, that's when you start playing the best, right?
Yep.
And it's an interesting, funny dynamic that's going on in your head, right? Of like, I'm in a critical situation, but I don't really care I'm in a critical situation, but I'm in a critical. So it's this back and forth, like mind game that's going on, right? This conversation in your head. Did you how did you work through like when you knew you were in a pressure situation? Was it just that remembering about what your mom went through to like give you that again? Was it that simple for you? Like, what was it for you? And then what advice would you give athletes who feel like this immense pressure to perform? What advice?
That's a really good question because it's that classic. It's so much easier said than done, right? Yes. And I'm telling you this, I wouldn't wish this upon my worst enemies of my experience, but my personal experience was so extreme that I think it made it a little bit easier for me once I decided to go in that direction of like, hey, if my mom can do this, what's so bad about an 0 for 4? You know, like nowadays, you know, visualization was a big thing for me. And just slowing things down, diaphragmatic breathing was a big thing as well.
Yes.
Where before I got on the box in the on deck circle and started taking my dry hacks, getting loose, I visualized the pitcher on the mound, me squaring up the baseball, you know, this kind of thing. I tried to slow my heartbeat down and take some big, deep diaphragmatic breaths through my belly, you know, that kind of thing. And then once I stepped in the box, the goal was, hey, I just did this. I just squared a ball up off this guy. It's just me versus him. And then, so I've already seen it happen. And I think it just, for me personally, just allowed me to relax a little bit. And again, with everything that my mom went through, I truly was convicted about, listen, no one in the world will tell me I don't care. I do care, but I don't give an F.
Yes.
There is a difference.
There's a difference.
There is a, for people that are like, oh, well, it's the same thing. It's not. It's not. I stopped giving an F. I cared though, but I just stopped giving an F about, hey, this won't be the last time I strike out with the bases loaded. It's going to happen again. I'm not trying. And now I actually take that mindset into my coaching career when I'm throwing BP. If I have a bad day throwing BP, I'm like, well, sorry, I'm not trying to throw bad BP.
Right.
This kind of thing. But again, easier said than done. But yeah, I think once you find that little thing to allow yourself permission to fail, I think things just slow down. Life in general for me slows down when I understand that. Listen, I care about things, but I will make mistakes.
Yes,
Nobody's perfect.
I think that's so critical for like every athlete listening right now, and coach. You need to understand this. And again, easier said than done, right? We talk about the mental side of, and success and all these things of like, it's simple really when you boil it down, but that doesn't mean it's easy, right?
No
so
doubt.
That's why the continuous training. But so a couple of things. One is that you said of like in the on deck circle, and I don't care what sport you play that you're listening to, right? There's a time to prepare before you go execute whatever that is, right? So if you're about to serve a volleyball, there's a moment before you actually serve and they blow the whistle, right? If you're in baseball, you're in the on deck circle, like all these different, there's time, even seconds to do this stuff, right? But to see yourself be successful, to slow your heart rate through that dynamic breathing, right? And just slowing. And when you're calm, your muscles fire faster, right? If you look at the science behind it, it's pretty crazy.
Yes.
But and I know that probably didn't take you very long to do. And then I think that last thing of like the perspective piece of, I deeply care about what I do, but it's almost like the way I look at like not giving enough. It's like, it's like all I'm doing is gathering info, and this, whatever is about to happen is going to give me some sort of feedback. And maybe it's not the thing I wanted, or maybe it is the result I wanted. Right. But it's like giving me feedback that I can take and be like, yeah, I absolutely care. I'm going to take that information. I'm going to use it next time to be more successful. But end of the day, I'm going to look at it as like, yep, I learned something. And
no doubt.
That's it. And then go back and prepare again. And it's that kind of like, but you deeply care because you're looking at the information, like you're looking at it. So I agree 100%. It's like that. I like that attitude of like, we care deeply, but you have this attitude of like, I don't give an F, or I'm going to use the info and learn what I need to learn and make the adjustment and go.
Yeah, no doubt. And there's been studies that also show, and I know that, I'm preaching to the choir right now, but there's studies that show that visualization, your brain doesn't recognize the difference of if you're actually physically doing it or not when you're visualizing it. It thinks you're doing it, right? So you close your eyes, you visualize squaring up a baseball up the middle, a line drive that the pitcher's got to like get out of the way. Your brain does not know that it's not happening. And that was something that once I found that out, I was like, holy crap. And you go to go to spring training, right? It starts at 6 a.m. What are they doing? Ground balls, cage work. You take thousands of swings a day, but it's like people hesitate to spend 10 minutes on just training their mind, right? When your brain's a muscle. And again, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's something that I'm really happy to see because it has never been more prevalent, in my opinion, in not just sports, but like big corporations. They always have mental skills coach, because when you train your brain, it really brings out the best in you, right? It optimizes who you are as an individual and what you can bring to the table. And part of that, I believe, is vulnerability. I believe that that's such a strength rather than a weakness. And I don't know if it's men and women, but I'm willing to bet you it's more of a trait in men that they believe being vulnerable is a weakness. When I look at it as a strength, it's like you got to understand you don't know everything. You need help. You can't do this journey by yourself. And so I believe that in order to unlock that sort of part of you that makes you want to not give an F, like you have to be willing to be vulnerable and understand I need help in this process as well.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I talk about this, I think, at volleyball, but it's like that. I think there's a massive shift that happens in your performance when you start understanding asking for help as a sign of strength, not weakness, right? And you have to find the right people to ask, right? Because if you approach a coach, and for coaches listening, right, you got to be open to this stuff, and you can't come back with some sarcastic remark. But it's like if a kid is asking you for help, boy or girl, you have to understand they're probably struggling with something. They want to improve, and you've got to help them, right? You got to set your ego aside. And if it's like, oh, go figure it out. It's like, no. You got to help them, right? Because otherwise they're not going to come next time. Right. And that's why the stigma sticks of asking for help is a sign of weakness, even though we all know it's not true. But coaches have got to be open to it. I think it's such a critical piece to this. Real quick, for those of you who don't know, again, what you're hearing from Michael, right, is like he's studying this stuff, right? He's learning this stuff. That's why I love what I do. It's like you look at the studies behind some of this stuff, visualization. People are like, oh, yeah, sure. Read the studies, right? There's this one, you've probably heard this one, Michael, but the free throw study that they've done a bunch of different times. But real quick, like they took like 90 people. They've done it multiple times. 90 people. They came into a gym one day, shot 10 free throws each, and they recorded the results, right? Then they broke those groups up into 3 different groups of 30 people. And group number 1 was to do nothing, right? Just go on with your day, go on with your life for the next 30 days. Group 2 had to physically shoot in the gym for 30 minutes every day. And group 3, they had to come in for 30 minutes, but just visualize themselves. And so they came back and they, again, everybody, all 90 shot 10 free throws, recorded the results. And then they looked at like the groups. So real quick, the group that did nothing, they had like no improvement. It was flat, right? Same result,
Weird, right? Yeah.
The group that physically shot, I always ask people, like, did they improve, get worse, stay the same? They're like, well, I assume they improved. Yes, by 24%. And then the group that visualized didn't touch a basketball. I always love asking a kind of leading question, Your Honor. But did they improve, get worse, stay the same? They're like, they got better. And I ask a percentage, and people are like 50%. I'm like, well, no, but 23%.
Yeah.
Right. So to your point, like understand the power of the brain and body, what it's doing. Of I physically shot, I improved by 24%. I just visualized, I improved by 23%. They did another study where they combined physical and the visualization, and it was 25%. So I always kind of joke, like they say, like, you want the extra 1%, start combining the mental stuff, but it starts to become real, and you're like, oh,
yes.
Now how do I apply this to baseball, volleyball, soccer, business, whatever?
And so I don't like to use the word slump. A lot of people in the game of baseball now, it probably is around in other sports too. Maybe I don't hear it as much, but being around baseball as much as I am, you hear the word slump a lot. And if I hear a kid say, "Hey, I was like, like, no, hey, I'm struggling a little bit," or what, I don't use the word slump, because slump is a pure mentality, right? And so if you're telling yourself, and that's why I say, listen, the greatest players in the world, their struggles might be 0 for 10, 0 for 12s, but in the third game, they're right back to it. The rest of us, Joe Schmoes, like throw my name into that. I've gone 0 for 35, 0 for 4, like, because you forget about how good you are, and you forget about the process and trusting the process and understanding, like, this is what's made me successful. Don't get away from this. But people are so quick to change because they don't have that immediate success, where the human is driven towards, it's a society thing. I want immediate results right now. I'm not patient, right?
Yes.
And that's I think we talked about it. The picture that we've sent each other is, everyone thinks success is a straight line, when the true successful people understand that it's a squiggly up and down, and then before you know it, you've trusted the process, and then you take off, right? And that's why I think the greatest players in the world, because you don't use the word slump, and you trust the process, and you know how good you are, and you know that if I stick to what makes me great, it's only a matter of time. Where if we don't get the immediate successes, the rest of us, myself included, you start looking for, oh, maybe I need a new thing. I need to do this. I need to do that. No, you don't. Right. So to your point about the visualization and the strength of mentality, I just wanted to add that tidbit.
So good.
There of what I thought too.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
What do you? We're have to do like part 2, part 3. I'll bring a microphone to the next volleyball match we're at, and we can
live on set.
Like, it's like you hear whistles in the background, piercing ear whistles. But what do you think was like? What was your secret to success? Let me ask that. Like, what made you, in your opinion, be able to excel and get to the top level and stay there where others didn't?
Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, the typical hard work, right?
Yep.
But I think I alluded to it previously. I was on the fast track out of there. Like, the window closes quick, right? I was up and down for the first 3 years with Seattle, and they had completely lost faith in me, and I don't blame them. But everything that my mom went through, and like I said, I think what allowed me to finally stay at that level, because anybody in the game knows that it's easier to get there than it is to stay there. I don't know what the percentages are, but it's like 2% of all professional baseball players make it, and like under 1% make a career of it. I think it's when I finally basically submitted to everything and just said, like, I don't care anymore, or I don't give an F anymore. I care, but I'm finally going to give myself permission to fail. And I had that attitude is like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I go 0 for 4 today. I get to play a game I love, and it just allowed me to have fun again. The joy of it and it really slowed the game down. It really did for me. And I think that's honestly that sort of mindset and mentality of it is what allowed me to stay there, because now all of a sudden I started sort of staying like this rather than deep diving and continuing to dig my hole deeper and deeper and deeper. It allowed me to sort of float, when the waves were a little bit rougher at times, rather than desperately trying to swim and sink.
Yes. I love that. Well, and so you talked too about like trusting the process, right? And just being consistent, things like that. I'm just real curious because, when you look at the best athletes like yourself, right? Again, it's all this mentality of like, even when you don't feel like doing it, you do it anyway, right? Did you have those days where you're like, man, I don't feel like following the process today? And
oh yeah,
how did you overcome that? Was it just like a moment decision? I'm going to do it anyway, or like, because a lot of athletes struggle with that, and I struggle with that sometimes in business too. It's like, man, how do I usually end up doing it, but how did you work through that?
Yeah, so like the quote, I think we've all heard it, the Ray Lewis quote, right? It's what you do when no one's watching, right? That's what separates everybody, and it's so true. And I tell that to my kids. I have taken that from, it's not mine. I've taken it from Ray Lewis. I'm like, that's brilliant. He's absolutely right. That's the separator. And for me, I was blessed where I had great teammates where we held each other accountable. Of like, hey, Sando, let's go, dude. Time to go to the cage, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was hungry, like most mid 25-year-olds, young 20s, whatever. I was hungry to perform, and when I got to my mid to late 20s, I realized that, like, holy crap, I've already been doing this for this long. Like, the window is shortening, and that motivated me.
Yes.
And that's when I knew, to answer your question, that I was ready to retire from baseball. Is I didn't enjoy the grind anymore. I missed days going to the cage. I didn't prepare myself for the game, because the work comes before the game starts. A lot of people, it's a massive misconception. A 7:00 game, and they're, you get there, what, 5:36? It's like, I've been here since about 12:30. Same work day as you. It's just different hours.
Yes.
And so I started showing up to the yard a little bit later. I would miss days in the cage. So for me, I realized I'm not enjoying the grind anymore. And it just takes so much extra work that people don't know about to get yourself ready on a nightly basis to perform against the best in the world. And that's when I knew I was ready to retire. I didn't enjoy the grind anymore.
That's very true. And this is the theme I hear, Michael, like with everyone I've interviewed, is like, you have to have a love for what you're doing, right? And it's not, I think there's a misconception there of like, well, I have to, like, I got to do the extra work. So it's like you're bouncing joyfully through some field, like, I don't know, birds flying and sun is shining. It's like, I have to, like, just love every single moment about it. No, that's not true. But the love's got to be there, where when you have to remember back to, like, oh, this is why I'm doing this. Like, I actually enjoy this game or enjoy what I'm doing.
It's like the Rocky workouts, right? Like, the Russian is up there with the state-of-the-art facility, but then there's Rocky sleeping in a barn, running through the snow that's up to his waist, and, like, he's working out punching frozen meat. Like,
yes,
he loves what he does, and he has a goal in mind. It's like, what are you willing to do?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to your point, when as soon as you lose it or don't reconnect with it, then it becomes the grind. Then that's when that phrase comes in. Like then it's the grind, then it's the job, then it's and
No
you
doubt.
got to reconnect with it.
Yeah, and it's like I'm not leaving my kids and my wife and my family if I'm not enjoying it, and
Yes.
I'm not giving it 100%. Like, it's not fair to them with me being gone, especially my wife, if I'm not going to put forth all my effort. And it changed like that. Like it really did. And that's when I knew I was ready. So to your point, it's like, it's what you do when people aren't looking that make
Yes.
you great, right? At whatever you do, the extra work, trust in the process, remembering how good you are, and not losing that focus.
Remember, athletes listening right now and coaches, if you're at a point, I think this is critical, right? There is an opportunity to rediscover your love for this stuff. So sometimes
Absolutely.
I talk to athletes. I don't know if you see this with players you work with now, but it's kind of like, well, I don't feel the love anymore, and I don't feel like doing this anymore. And my first instinct is like, well, don't quit and give up. It's like, let's talk about why you love it. Maybe we just need to just reconnect with that first.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's all you need to be like, oh yeah, like I actually enjoy swinging a bat around or kicking a ball in a net or like whatever sport you play.
Yeah.
But start there, because it's often like I was telling you, like, I was a walk-on in college, not once but twice. I was cut my freshman year, and then tried out on a dare from a friend sophomore year. Ended up making the team, and the rest is history there, right? But what I discovered sophomore year was I found my love of the game again, because the game had been taken from me. It was gone. And then all of a sudden I had it back, and I'm like, oh man, this is freaking amazing. I'm like, this is unbelievable. And I had one of my teammates commented one day, I have the whitest teeth. And I'm like, what like whitest teeth? And I'm like, why would you say that? And he goes, because you're smiling all the time. And I'm like, because I found the love again.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we were doing this horrible base running drill. I'm like, this is kind of fun. Like,
yeah.
who gets to do this? Come on. Like, this is amazing. But it's such an underrated component. What's been the biggest shift from going from player to coach for you?
So in I'd say my final 2 years. So there was a period of like up and down in my first couple of years of the big leagues. And then I stayed for a solid, probably 6 or 7. And then the final couple of years of my career, again, I was more so AAA than I was in the major league level when I was, trying to hold on as long as I could. And first year I was pretty much playing every day in AAA, but then my second year, it was a couple times a week. I was sort of that player that I remember when I was early 20s of like, hey, if someone goes down to the big league level, this guy could possibly step in and he'll be fine until he's ready, and then we'll release him and we'll move on to the next, like, a safety net. Anyways, I caught myself, like, the younger players were gravitating towards me, and we would just talk shop and talk the game. If they made a mental mistake or whatever, I'd take them aside once they got into the dugout after 3 hours and say, hey, what were you thinking? This kind of thing. And so I knew from that moment that I was like, hey, there might be something for me after this. And so how my season or my career ended as a player was, it was 2018 in June. I bounced around between a couple teams in AAA, and I ended with the White Sox in Charlotte. And for anybody who doesn't know, that is a big league ballpark. That's a big league city. It's awesome for AAA. It's good as it gets. And so I just wasn't enjoying it anymore, this kind of thing. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, God, if I'm not enjoying it here, like, I can't enjoy the game anymore. And so the White Sox ended up releasing me mid-June. And I went home, and my agent was still taking calls. Hey, Sando, they want you here, blah, blah, blah. What do you think? I go, no, I'm done. I'm done with the game. I haven't had a summer with my family since I can remember. I'm done. And so, a month later, hey, you got a call. Would you like to? No, I'm done. And gradually, as the offseason came, and alluding to what kind of you said, I started getting that itch again of like wanting to play. And when I decided to return, I didn't know what the game had for me anymore. I turned away multiple teams.
Yes.
And I was like, no, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to dot the I's, cross the T's. And I went and spoke with somebody here locally in Denver, a sports, psychologist and everything. And just trying to give myself the best chance and the best opportunity to go out there and give it one last hoorah kind of thing. Ended up getting a call from the Rockies. And I was like, I've been living in Denver since 2011. And it takes you to the end of my career to give me a call and give me a chance. And so I went to camp with the Rockies, ended up getting released right at the end of camp. Held on. Now, this is 2019. Held on for about 3 more months. All teams were telling me verbatim. So I was reaching out to them. I'm like, okay, let's call a spade a spade. I was so blessed that happened to me because I walked away from the game when the teams were calling for me and the game still wanted me to play. And I desired that. And that's what I learned through talking to the sports psychologist is like, it's like a breakup and your ex is trying to get back together and you're like, haha, no, this kind of thing.
Exactly.
And then when I tried to call them and I wanted to go back to the game was telling me no. So that's when I knew like, okay, I'm ready to move on without any regrets. I think that's the biggest positive that came out of that situation where is I did not go talk to a sports psychologist or a mental specialist. I would have probably stayed away from the game, but I would have had long-lasting regrets of what would have happened if I would have just given it one more shot. So that really helped my transition into coaching. When the game finally told me, no, it's time for you to give it up, then I knew I was ready to start coaching.
Love that.
That was my transition. So it was easier for me that way.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, and it's kind of cool though that you had that opportunity in AAA to like get a little glimpse into coaching, right? Because you're now the veteran in the locker room. Who's experienced a lot of stuff up and down. Like you've experienced a lot, and to be able to pour into those, dare say kids, right? But players younger than you at that point was kind of a not smooth transition, but kind of a cool way to give you a glimpse into what it might look like.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You still get out there and swing when you're throwing BP. Or you're like somebody swing, throw to me, please.
No, God, no. My oblique would be in left field. No. I enjoy it, though. And I have a newfound respect for a good fungo hitter, a good BP thrower. It's not as easy as it looks.
True.
But no, I do enjoy. And I knew when I got into that, I wanted to be on the field. I wanted to continue to wear that uniform. I wanted to get my shoes dirty being on the dirt. That may change years down the road, but for me, that's what I love to do. And like you said, like I felt and I saw that in my final couple of years being in AAA.
Yeah.
Almost like a player coach,
Yes.
Yeah. And for me, I took a lot from previous coaches that I'd played for, the good, the bad, and try to put my own spin on it of what I wanted to be when I got into it.
I love it because I was going to ask, and I'll be aware of time too, but who was one of the most influential coaches you had, and how did he, help you kind of define who you are now? Yeah,
so I had a manager in the big leagues, Eric Wedge. I don't know if that name rings a bell to anybody, but he was I think he was an early 30s manager of the year with Cleveland. And then he came over to Seattle, and I'd been through a couple managers prior to him. And in my opinion, he's the greatest leader of men. And that is something that I took from him, just the way he went about his business, the respect he commanded. But the biggest thing is no matter what took place in front of millions of people, he would always have his players back. And I actually had an experience with this where I made a crucial mistake, actually lost us the game. And in the media, he defended me and he said something along the lines like, I understand and this is prior to us even talking. He said, I understand what he was thinking. I understand why he did it. I love his aggressiveness or whatever. And then he would call me behind closed doors and say, hey, let's talk about it. This can never happen again. This is the reasons why. But I saw what he said, and our PR guy came up to me. He's like, hey, just so you know, this is what Wedgie said to everybody in the media. He's got your back. And that's when I was like, dude, I will go to war for this guy. So he is one of the most influential managers I've ever had. And the other one, and we still stay in touch. And then the other one I had His name is Alonzo Powell. He's now the current AAA hitting coach for the Salt Lake Bees, which is the Angels.
Yes.
But he was my AAA hitting coach in Tacoma. And what really stood out to me was that we never talked about mechanics, ever. But every single day, and this is a lot of games, every single day, he made me feel like I was the best player on the planet. So when I went into the game, I had the utmost confidence to perform. And that was something as well that I realized. And this was before I even knew about the mental side of the game or even considered it. But we go back to why we're even having this conversation in the first place. Like, everyone talks about being ready to perform. Oh, I have to get my swings in, or I have to feel my hands inside the ball, or whatever. He made me feel like I was the greatest player on the planet every day. And that was his way of getting me prepared. And not just me, everybody. And so I took that as well. And now, I mean, this might be one of the first times I've actually talked about this openly. Going back to, like, there's just another example of how important the brain is and how important your mindset is.
Yes. So true.
So that was a great question. Yeah. But those are the two guys that really stood out, amongst others, of course.
Sure.
The two main guys that stood out to me. And we still stay in contact, just picking each other's brains and just talking shop and talking life. So
let me ask you one follow-up question.
Yeah.
Making you feel like the best player ever. How did he do that? Like, for coaches listening right now, like, was it just he literally, as you're taking swings, be like, man, you're just a bad dude, or I don't know, like, how did he do it?
Well, that's a great question. And I think you, as the great coaches, know how to get through to individuals because not everyone's the same. People aren't going to listen to that, dude, you're the man, but some people will, right? Like, you just have to find out through creating relationships with your guys. And that, I guess, answering another question to myself, was that's another one of his huge main abilities, was creating relationships with different people and coming from different backgrounds. And, there's another reason, I guess, why I loved him so much. But, I think that there's no right answer. You have to find out what makes that guy tick. And the greats do it. The greats figure that out.
And I think too, like, asking questions, and you have to spend time with people too, right? To ask those questions of
being vulnerable, right?
Yes. Yeah. And even saying, I think sometimes we ask players, like, we try to blanket motivate people, which doesn't work. Or we think it's going to take too much time. So we stick there, right? Instead of, like, sometimes asking players, understanding they may not know. But as they think about it too, like, it starts to evolve as you have those conversations. And then you're like, and then one day it's like epiphany of, like, whoa, yeah, that's it. And you both are like, holy moly.
And so whether I'm right or wrong, one of the things that I love to do with now sort of getting away from the mental side, more on the physical side here, taking my outfielders from the draft. And one of the things I loved to do was go out into the outfield. And we're going to talk shop. It's going to be about the game, but that's not my main purpose. And I'll give them all a ball. And what I noticed was, and I learned this from one of my coaching mentors, what I learned was some guys will stand there like, almost like military style, ball and glove, staring at you, listening to you and nodding. And those guys learn by listening. Then you'll find guys that will smack the ball into their glove, pick it up, smack it, pick it up, smack it. Those guys learn by feel, right? So you have to deliver the same message, but you're going to have to do it differently because not everyone learns the same. And I think a lot of people get into that habit of, like, oh, this guy's an idiot. This guy's dumb. He can't retain. He has zero aptitude. Okay, well, have you tried showing him video? Have you tried taking him out there and physically doing it with him? Because maybe he just learns differently.
Yes.
Go to the flip side on the mental part of the game is, like, how do you get through to guys? Because we all grow up from different backgrounds. Some guys are a little bit more tentative and have a bigger barrier. And like, we go back to vulnerability. When I get to know somebody as far as a player, the first question that I really ever ask them after introducing myself is, hey man, you got kids? Like, I'm trying to show interest in their personal life. Family is a big one. And usually if they do, they'll immediately lower the barrier and that wall because they're so proud of their children that they want to talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get them to sort of open up to you. And you're not even talking baseball, but what you're trying to do is build a relationship and that trust. Because players in baseball, maybe in other sports too, but again, just speaking of baseball, they only want to know three things. That is, can you help me? Can I trust you? And will you make me better? You know, that's it.
Yes.
Do you care about me? Will you make me better? And can I trust you? And I think once you gain trust, harder with others than some, you know, but once you gain that trust, the others will follow.
Yes.
So
true. All right. Next one, volleyball court. Actually, well, we'll spitball something in spring training. I'll pull you away or something.
Let's do it, man. Yeah.
Maybe you can throw me BP so I can like pull something out of socket too. But
perfect. Bring a helmet.
You throw. I'll probably be in full catcher's gear.
Whatever it takes.
Jeez Louise. I can't thank you enough, man, for spending time with me. And again, we'll be meeting again and chatting and
look forward to it.
Doing round two, but I can't thank you enough.
It's funny how like things come full circle, right?
Really is. Yeah,
it's awesome. Like I'm so happy that our daughters are playing together again, and hopefully for the foreseeable future too. So
I hope so. Yeah, it's so fun. Well, Michael, thank you again. Everyone watching, listening right now, I want to thank you as well. Again, as I say almost every time, it's like, go back and watch this. I hope you were taking notes during it, but if you weren't, I mean, shoot, like upload it to ChatGPT and have it transcribe it for you, whatever you need. But like, go through and just take one thing that Michael talked about and implement it. Take action, right? It's action equals results. That's going to get you where you want to go. Take one thing and start working on it, whether it's visualization, it's the breathing, it's the way you coach. It's like whatever it is, take it and start implementing. It's going to get you where you want to go faster than you think. So please share this with your family, with your friends, with your teammates, your coaching staff, everyone, as we spread the word about Masters of the Game. And we will see you on the next interview. Thanks, everybody.